All right, before I came here and found you people, I was working in Central Texas for a nonprofit, an environmental nonprofit. And let's see, here we go. Oh, there I am. Doofy hat. And much of my work was coordinating these large volunteer events where sometimes 100 more people would come together and we would plant and care for trees. And sometimes we'd be planting great big container trees, and sometimes we'd be planting saplings, or sometimes we'd be clearing away invasive species and mulching around trees. And at first glance, you might think that this has absolutely nothing to do with ministry. And I have to admit, they don't teach us tree care at seminary. But I did see it as a way to take my core values, my ministry, out into the larger world. And the larger world seemed to appreciate this attention. Because if, as you might have noticed, there's a lot of room for improvement in the larger world. There are just a few things that could be changed for the better. Things like the way we've gone about degrading our environment and heating up the atmosphere. Things like the way that people demonize one another for the way they dress or talk or pray or don't pray. Really, somebody should just do something about this. We need to get on out there and change the world. Or maybe not. I mean, honestly, I'm not the kind of person to go out there and change the world. I'm usually really quite happy in my own garden, and I don't like yelling that much. And so this is really kind of awkward as a minister, especially as a UU minister, because ministers are supposed to be leaders, and we're supposed to be out there, out in the world. And oh my gosh, this week my colleagues are posting selfies out in front of NRA headquarters to protest Sandy Hook, and they've got their collars and their stoles and posting pictures of themselves. In Charlottesville, arms linked together, standing on the side of love. And meanwhile, I'm posting pictures of trees. I mean, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and I'm nattering on about trees. What kind of a response is that? It's mostly because sort of who I am. I just try and focus on what the hell I can do about the hell that's broken out closest to me. It might be something as simple as just giving my neighbor some peppers from our garden. Yes, I donate money to the food bank, but that's not as nice as just talking to my neighbor and finding out what she really needs. She doesn't need more beans or rice. She receives meals from Meals on Wheels. And that's very nice, but they're kind of bland, and Elena does not do bland. So she needs peppers, and I got peppers. And then sometimes she gives back to me. She'll hand a jar of the most incendiary hot sauce. And I receive it gratefully and graciously, because if I ever needed to have an experience with the divine, I just put some of that hot sauce on. You see all the cosmos. Yes, it's endorphins, but it's good. Now, yes, I recognize that we need people who will yell and march and bang on pans, because I know sometimes it takes a whole lot of people yelling to point out a problem and get something started. But I also think we need both. We need both talking over the fence and protesting at the Capitol. We need both. And I also think that there's a middle way, something between sharing peppers and protesting in the streets. There's a middle way, and that's volunteering. And I know a bunch of you are already doing that. And that's one of the things I find very attractive about this congregation. You guys are already out there doing a lot. So I don't need to tell you, there are a million ways to volunteer. And I believe that each one has the potential of changing the whole world. I believe that volunteers are our most powerful agents of change in this world. I believe that. When I was learning to coordinate volunteers, I was told that it's very important, very powerful to be able to estimate the dollar value of their labor in dollar terms. So, just in case you didn't know, the current value of volunteer labor is currently placed at $24.14 per hour. So if you're volunteering, you are essentially giving $24.14 of your value. And that's up 15 cents. Up 58 cents from 2015. Your time is getting more valuable. And so at the end of year reporting for our nonprofit, I would go ahead and I'd multiply the number of volunteers and the hours that they'd worked, and then multiply that number by $24.14 to get a dollar figure for what we would have had to pay if we'd had to pay people to plant and care for all those trees. And that number was staggering, thousands upon thousands of dollars that our volunteers were worth. But I hated doing that. And here's why. Because the dollar figure really didn't talk about the change that had happened. And I didn't like it because it reinforces this vulgar idea that volunteers are simply free labor. I hate that term. I didn't like it because it reduces people to numbers, and people are more than just their work potential. So when I went out and recruited volunteers, I wasn't just thinking about the job that needed doing and how to find some free, warm bodies to do it. I was looking for people who wanted to change the world, or at least get something done around here. Because, remember, I believe that volunteers are the most powerful agent of change. And it's not simply because these are people who want to do something nice for their community. It's more than that. When comfortable people volunteer, we're apt to think that we're just going to go out and share our wonderfulness, and we're going to use our amazing gifts and talents to make things better over there where things are not so good. I'll bring myself and things will get better. My good intentions, my elbow grease are going to make things better for those other people over there. But that's not the powerful part of the change. The powerful part is it's a two-way process. Okay, one of the most amazing things about volunteers is that they are the people who will get themselves up off of the sofa, out of their comfort zone, and go out into the world to give of themselves. But in that process, in doing just that, they also make themselves vulnerable, expose themselves to all sorts of new things and new people and new parts of town and new ideas. And in that exposure, they're changed. They see their world in a new way, and they're never quite the same after that. Last week, Monty and I delivered furniture for Amarillo Housing First. It meant we had to go to one part of town we'd never been, pick up furniture, and take it to another part of town we'd never been. We saw a part of Amarillo we hadn't seen before. We met people here in Amarillo that we would never have met otherwise. Once you've seen the problem up close, once you've met the people who are actually hungry, once you've read stories to the kids while their parents wait to see the doctor at the low-cost clinic, you begin to see the problems with the system. with the institutions, the mindset that would create a situation where people could be hungry in this country, or the system that makes it difficult for a family to get medical care. And a person who can see the problem up and down through the system is a person who can start to make change in that system. Here's what I mean about volunteering being a two-way process. Both the recipient and the giver are changed by the exchange. Here's a story. When our son was about 11, my husband took him to volunteer with our church. We participated in a program called Hands-on Housing, where members of the community would go to a home of someone who could not afford to maintain their home. And so people would go and help fix that house up. And while some of the folks were working at replacing drywall and caulking the windows, there needed some work to be done up on the roof. And so they sent my son up on the roof to remove some of the old shingles before they made the repairs. And, for Henry, this was really cool because it meant climbing up a ladder and stomping around on a roof. You don't get to do that very often. And, but as he's walking around on the roof, he saw the hole. He saw the hole in the roof. And the hole was so bad that he could look down into the homeowner's bedroom. And he could see how the man had arranged tarps to keep rainwater off him while he slept in his own home. At that moment, our son understood the magnitude of the problem. And later on, he told his dad, "No one should ever have to live like this." Now, we could have simply sat him down at home, and we could have tried to explain the complexities of poverty to our son. But being there, seeing that, changed him way more profoundly than any earnest lecture might have. Volunteering changes our mental map of the way things are, because we all have a mental map of the way things are. And when we volunteer, when we go out, we change our perception of the places and the people, because now we've been right up in it. We've seen it. And now we can't unsee it. So we have to reshape our map. So yes, the new roof gets put on, the soup gets served, the furniture gets delivered. And yes, some of my wonderfulness has gone out and changed some part of the problem, but now I can understand the problem much better than I did back in the comfort of my own home. And that is the change that changes the world. Here's another way that volunteers are changing the world. They're getting up close to one another. Volunteers are eating a donut and holding a trash bag and pouring water on the sapling that was just planted. And in that time, in that space, working together, there's room for conversation. The kind of conversation where people share the small things like what they eat and what they do if they could change the world and where they're from. Little things. It's chit-chat. Volunteers chit-chat. It's the kind of talking that takes place when you're working shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face. And while working together, people are more likely to set aside their differences and focus on the shared task. One of my favorite memories, and I don't have a photograph of a tree planting, was two complete strangers planting, working together. And one of them, he was wearing a cowboy hat and she was wearing a hijab, headscarf. And they were laughing and they were struggling to dig a hole for this tree, and the ground was really compacted, and it took them an hour, but they planted a tree together. And then they went their separate ways. And while they'll probably never see one another again, they both know that in that schoolyard, their tree is growing. Here's another story. We held a planting event to plant about 1,200 saplings in one morning. And you can do that because they're really little, and you just jab a hole and stick it in and stomp it in. And we were going to be planting along a creek that was between two ponds, and we were planting these native species and removing invasive species, and the trees, the little saplings, were going to help slow erosion and bring about plant diversity and try and basically reforest an area. It was the Saturday after the 2016 election, and many of us were feeling kind of fearful and stunned. But we plodded along, setting out the shovels and getting the buckets and sorting all the saplings. And then all at once, all of the volunteers showed up. And there was total chaos getting them all signed in, because I was expecting some college students and some Girl Scouts and some of the neighbors, and I was expecting the usual do-gooder types who show up with their own gloves. And they all did show up, but what I didn't expect was that all the college students were part of the Indian Students Association. So they were all students either from India or whose families were from India. And they were all chattering back and forth in English and Hindi and other dialects. And then all of the Girl Scouts turned out to be Muslim. They were from a Girl Scout group from one of the local Muslim temples. And so there were girls and their moms wearing their headscarves. And then the neighbors, well, some of the neighbors only spoke Spanish and some of the neighbors only spoke English. But within an hour, they were all planting saplings, getting muddy, laughing, asking questions. And then somebody found a tree that a beaver had gnawed down. A beaver in central Austin. I know, and I'm thinking a little hipster beaver with a little goatee and chunky glasses and latte. But what that meant was that the creek and the ponds were healthy enough for beavers to return. Okay. What does this mean? I'm telling you this because if you are fearful for our country, I'm telling you this so that you know that here in America, there are Girl Scouts who wear hijabs. And there are young first-generation girls getting engineering degrees. I want you to know this. I want you to know that they like planting trees. And that's going to keep the beavers happy. Now, if I had asked these folks, how would you like to participate in a cross-cultural program to discuss the challenges of our world? A few of them might have shown up, but if you say, hey, how would you like to plant some trees, have some free snacks, get a little bit muddy, and take care of the world? A lot of people will show up. So when you're despairing for our world, when you are tempted to feel overwhelmed by the awfulness of the news, first off, turn off the news. It's not there to help you. I want you to stop for a moment and just look directly around you. What can you do? What can you do right here, right nearby, within arm's reach? Can you start with some small action, some act of selflessness, giving of your time and energy? More importantly, Are you willing to change yourself? Change yourself in such a way that the whole of the world might slightly shift and change with you. The only thing you have to lose is that old map, the old way of seeing the wholeness of our world. May it be so.